La STM vous souhaite la bienvenue à bord.
What is up? Welcome to Metro Anarchy. My name is Fleek. What is Metro Anarchy? It's a Cities Skylines video series focused exclusively on public transport. We only do public transportation, no surface roads or traffic manager or any of that. There are people out there that do a much better job of that than I can, so we're not going to be copying them. We're going to do our own thing with public transportation. So I go out on the Steam Workshop and find a city and look at its current public transportation system. What do the numbers look like? What does the traffic look like? And then we pull all of that out, delete it all of the system and all of the lines, and then we rebuild a new public transportation system from scratch. We're going to use all kinds of public transport over a number of different episodes with the same city, and the goal is to see how many total people we can get using public transportation, and then also what percentage of the overall population is that. Try and get those numbers as high as possible, and then over the different cities compare how well we can do with those two goals. So we're going to start out with a metro, and then in future episodes, we're going to add different styles of public transportation. So reach out to me and let me know what form of public transportation should we put into the next episode. This is the city of Gothiefen. I actually think it's the user's name, Tiefen, and the word go put together, but German was my second language, so anything that looks remotely German, I pronounce with a German pronunciation. So we're going to go with Gothiefen. And I read in the Steam description that this was this user's first city. And for a first city, this is really fantastic. Over 105,000 citizens, not too many problems, a little bit of traffic here and there. But overall, the public transportation system isn't great, but we're gonna improve that. So as I mentioned, I love feedback. Shoot me an email, reach out to me on Twitter, comment on the videos, send me ideas for upcoming episodes and things to do with the series. As always, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do subscribe, mash on the bell so that you can get notified of upcoming episodes. And as I mentioned, that traffic wasn't too bad. We end up in a traffic jam. So let's take this opportunity to take a look at the current public transportation system and what those numbers look like. Here we are on our bird's eye view of Gothiefen. You know, one of the things that is really interesting about coming to cities after they've been built, which I didn't really think about until I started this series, is that, you know, when you're building a city, you know it from all different directions because you're, you know, moving the map around and constantly changing your views. But when you come to a city after it's already been built, it can be really disorienting. So I have taken a little bit more time than I should have to decide which way I'm going to think of as north. And this is the orientation that I'm going to use. But I found that it is helpful when you're working in a city that you haven't built to have that one orientation where you can go back to it to understand where everything is and remember where everything is until you get more familiar with the city. So we're going to have Laurel Park down here on the south side. And other thing that I love about this map is all of the water. I love having bridges and things like that. So it was one of the things that really jumped out at me about this town was the water. So let's take a look at the overall transport. So right now we've got a little bit of bus, a little bit of metro, no tram, some train. I'm not quite sure if we're going to get to the train system in this city. The train system, we'll look at it in just a second. It's really cool, but it winds all the way through the city, and so that might be too much of an undertaking. No ferries. We're definitely going to do a ferry. With all of this water out there, we've got to have a ferry. And then we have got the cable car, and the cable cars, when there's not a lot of change in elevation, I know you can do the cable car just on flat ground, but it really looks kind of silly. So I don't think we'll probably do a cable car, but we will find some place to put in a monorail for sure. So overall, we've got about 2,800 people using the public transportation system. That's only 2.69% of the overall 105,000 population. So we are definitely going to have to improve that a little bit. So I wanted to jump in and just take a look. We'll get things started here now that we've got all of those numbers down. I wanted to point out a couple of different things. If we zoom in here, you'll notice here, this angle is just too steep. So you've got this train just hanging out there, and I don't know if it will happen while we're watching, but it will eventually just despawn and go away. But one of the things that's limiting this metro system right now is some of these angles. There's another one around here somewhere that is similar. Let's take a look for it. Oh, it's this one down here. Yeah, this one is similar. Got the same thing. I think this line, well, no, you can tell. See, you've got all these metros backed up here because it can't get around this corner. And so this train's just going to sit there until, no, it took off the other direction. This was the totally wrong. So I think this line, there is a line that goes through here, but there is also one that goes back. But this is also a turn that's just a little bit too tight. These 90-degree angles can work, but they do slow down the trains quite a bit. So we are going to pull all of this out. But the overall idea is I think the right idea for this style of city. We're gonna go for I think a dual ring system. So we'll have one metro line going around the outside, another smaller ring on the inside, and then some crossing lines going across. So let's take a quick look at the traffic. Actually, even though I said that traffic flow isn't something that we're really going to be focusing on, I think that we might be able to impact that traffic percentage. And it's at 59%, so it means that the road system is pretty good, but it does have some problem areas. So we'll note these problem areas right in here, and hopefully we can get that metro and public transportation system going. So because we're going to do these other forms of public transportation in future episodes, let me know where I should put the monorail and the tram. The bus lines are going to be everywhere. Metro is going to be everywhere. Ferry, also let me know where you think the ferry should go. But definitely those three: the tram, the ferry, and the monorail. Where in the city should I put those in future episodes? So one of the other things I just love about Cities Skylines is areas like this, where you've got multiple bridges coming across, and then this one just cracks me up because I know I've done this tons of times where you're starting to build something and you're like, oh no, the train's in the way, and then you have to drop it down underneath. Actually, when I saw this dip, I was like, oh, we can correct that with the Move It mod. And then nope, I see why he did that, or she, could have been a she, why they did that. Got to get it underneath that train line. So, all right, let's jump in and start taking a look at some of the pedestrian areas. So, next step that I take is to take a look at the routes and see where pedestrians are walking, how far they walk within the city, so that we can get a better idea of planning the metro. As I was starting to take a look at the pedestrian routes, I realized that it was a little bit confusing to have the existing metro in place. When the routes were going over the top of the metro, it just was kind of hard to see them. So we're going to take out the underlying metro. And when I was looking at that, I thought it would be interesting to show you guys. I think there are no underground roads other than the metroway, so no networks underground other than the metro system. So since we're going to be deleting that, you can use the Move It mod, and I think we can delete the entire metro system at once. In the last episode, I showed you how when you're using the Move It mod, you can deselect everything except for segments, and that will let you, when you're underground, use this selector tool to select a big chunk of the metro and delete it at one time. But you have to be careful if there are underground roads. But this city doesn't have any underground roads, so maybe because it was this person's first city, they didn't know that you could go underground with roads, but I think we can delete all of them at once. So I just want to see if we highlight the whole thing, all green, and bulldoze. Ah, it worked. Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the metro stations real quick, and then we'll be back to do the routes, the pedestrian routes. So as I mentioned, I think we are going to do a dual ring metro. So with one ring around the outside and then a smaller ring on the inside, and then with spurs going across both of those rings. But before I look at the pedestrian routes to get an idea of that layout, I want to zoom down here onto these two little islands just to show you something really quickly about using roads and then how that impacts your public transportation system. May or may not impact your public transportation system depending on how you build the bridges and what types of networks you use for those bridges. So to do the routes, you go over here to the traffic routes, and then I am specifically interested in the pedestrians, so you deselect everybody but the pedestrians, and then that allows you to click on a section of road and it will show you where the pedestrians are walking. So in these two islands, the thing you'll notice here is that the pedestrians will walk across this bridge, but there's nobody walking across this bridge over here or this bridge over here. So now let's zoom in and take a look at what we have going on there. So this bridge here is one of the 6-lane road, so that has sidewalks. Oops. That has sidewalks. Over here, this bridge is a highway. You can see it's a one-way highway, and it does not have sidewalks. It does, I think, maybe have... Those might be bike lanes, or are they just... I don't think they're bike lanes either. Let's take a look. If we go to cyclists and click on it, no cyclists either, so they're not bike lanes either. So just be careful when you're building those. Also happens on roundabouts. If you use highways for your roundabouts, that's not a problem, and it's not a problem to use them, use a highway for a bridge either. But remember then that you have to build either a bike lane or a pedestrian lane across those spans in order to allow pedestrian and bike traffic to get across. So what this tells me on this section is that we're going to need a stop here, but we don't actually need two. The previous metro system has two metros here. People are walking across this bridge, so, and it's not too far for people to walk, as we'll see in just a second, people will walk quite a ways within the city if you give them ways to do that. So let's jump back out to the bird's eye view. And now what I want to take a look at is some of the pedestrian routes in terms of the 2 rings that we're going to build. So we want to go around the edge. I'm not going to do this for the whole city on camera. I will do most of this off camera so that you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. But I wanted to give you an idea of the process that I use. I'm going to come along the edge here and click on these outer areas and see how far into the city people are walking from the edges, because we're going to have the outer metro ring running along the edge here. We want to see how far are people walking, because if they'll walk there, we don't need to have a metro line take them that distance. So one thing I'll notice here is that people from this area are walking kind of right along into here. So now I'll go over to the next section, click on this again, and see it's kind of right along on this line here. So just initially what that's telling me then is that we'll have our outer ring coming around out here, and then somewhere right along in here is probably where we're going to have our inner ring. So now I'm going to go around and do this around the rest of the city to get a better idea of all of the pedestrian routes. Just wanted to give you a little peek into the process that I use in terms of figuring out. You can do this with a grid system as well. Check out my last episode, and it shows you how I did that on a grid-based system. But with this one, we're looking at the ring system. So I go along the edges here and figure out then how far into the city are people walking. Again, yep, see here, I walk into about here. So now as it comes around, that gives me an idea that we're gonna want that inner ring to come along in here and then right around in here as well, because this is the limit of people are walking from this part of the city. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the rest of the city, and then we will get busy building that metro system. So actually, before I start building the metro, as I was going through and taking a look at the routes, I noticed a couple of areas. This area up here, and then this little area over here, which don't have any connection to any of the other roads by pedestrian traffic. So let's go ahead and check out these pedestrian routes. You'll notice all of these pedestrian routes stay within this one little confined area. And if we go in and check it out, it's pretty obvious why. So there are streets that have sidewalks, but then this actually is a regular street. But then once we get up to here, it turns into a freeway ramp. And then, of course, we're actually going onto a freeway with all of these connections anyway. So even if there were sidewalks, pedestrians wouldn't be able to walk on the freeway. So again, just like the bridge that I mentioned earlier, that's always important to realize that freeways don't have sidewalks. They don't allow pedestrians to go across those networks. So let's go ahead, go in, grab a pedestrian pavement path, and I scoped out a little area here. We are going to, let's grab the page down. And get it as close as you can. And now let's page down to go underground. There. Now we're going to go to the Move It mod and move this guy a little bit closer so that the sidewalk is connected up. All right. Back to the pavement path, and now I think we're just gonna have to bulldoze. Oh no, actually what I decided was that we will put the path up right here, Page that down to the right height. Now that we're underground, we can connect this up underground. It doesn't really matter what it looks like as long as it's connected. Well, let's get that connection. Come on. There we go. All right, so now we have got this little pedestrian path connected up. And they can walk from over here to over here. Now this other little area, where did that go? Oh, it's right here. Same thing with this. If we take a look at the routes, it has got the same situation going on. All of the pedestrian routes stop right along this road because it is, I believe, a freeway. Let's check it out. Yeah, you can tell that's a freeway. So if you don't know the Net Picker mod, it's a great mod, Electric's Net Picker. You click on that and then it click on a certain roadway and it brings that roadway up, and so you can tell that that's a 3-lane highway there. So I'm gonna go ahead and connect this up, and then in fact, you know, I'll do that off camera, but I also want to ask if people like seeing building of the metro in time lapse. These videos can run a little long if I do lots of time lapses, so I am going to show that. Once I've got this connected up, we'll come back and go right into a time lapse of placing all of the metro lines. But let me know in the comments if you like seeing the time lapses or not, or if you just prefer that I build that stuff off camera and then come back and show it to you. So let me know. I'm going to do this one as a time lapse, but let me know if that's something that people skip over. I'm happy to skip it as well. So we will be right back after I connect this area up and drop into a time lapse to get the metro built. Just one other quick note before I drop into the time lapse to get that metro built. The stations that I use are fantastic assets built by Joe Boy BV. Always like to give him a shout out. They are the simple metro stations. I will put a link to them in the Steam workshop in the description below. There's a whole bunch of them. I only use 3, but definitely check them out. You do not need mods to use them. If you'd like to know more about how to set up metros using these multi-track stations, check out my short tutorial on that. I will put a link up above on the screen right now. So I will drop into the time lapse and then we will come back and check out how the metro is working for Gothiefen. All right, so we have the entire metro system built. You may have noticed that I had a little bit of trouble with the terrain down in this section here in the time lapse. I did not realize that, again, as I did last week, or in the last episode, I should say, didn't pay attention to the terrain, and because this lake is a lower elevation, I had some problems with that. And then there was another spot as well. Oh, it was right here as well. Same thing, a little bit lower elevation with the water, and so when I originally brought the line through, I brought it out the side of the hill and up above the terrain. So had to bulldoze that and work around in both cases, but I think that worked out okay. So got the outer ring built, the inner ring, and then we have a couple of long lines connecting up the rings. So I called this the airport line, and then this is the central line. And let's go ahead and take a look at the individual numbers for the different lines. Pretty decent on the longer lines. The shorter lines aren't too heavily traveled, although this northeast line up here, because there's a ton of high density residential out here. If we switch over, we can see this is all high density residential. This line out here was really slammed at first. It settled down a little bit, but has been very, very, very active. Surprisingly, this area has been the most heavily traveled. These 3 stops in here, I'm not sure. I thought that it would be a little bit more evenly distributed because of all of this high density out here, but it turns out this is probably the area where we should focus for our next form of public transportation. Well, let's look at the overall numbers that we hit. So a total of 4,862 people using the metro. That is an increase of just over 3,000 and 167%. And we've gone overall from about a 2.69% using public transportation to 5.05. And that also is minus all of the bus. We had about 350 people using the bus, and I took the bus lines out. So that should go back up when we put bus lines back in. But overall, I'm very happy with those numbers. One other interesting thing is that the airline traffic and the ship traffic both went down. The ship traffic is gone. Now, there were only 9 people per week using it before, but the airport has gone down significantly. It's gone down by just under 50%. So I'll be interested to see if that rebounds. It shouldn't. Nothing really changed. We left that station out there. I actually left the original station that was out there because we needed one at the airport. So very, very interesting to see how that will rebound going forward. One last thing to note, even though I'm not really focusing too much on the traffic, I did notice that it did go up a little bit. It was at 58% before, and it has popped up to 66. It's been floating between 66 and 68%. So again, it'll be interesting to see as we add more public transportation if we can get that traffic number up even higher. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode. In the next episode, we'll add another style of public transportation to the city to go along with the metro. I think I know where I'm going to put it, but I haven't decided quite yet. So send me your ideas for where you think I should put it in and what style I should add. If you have a city that you'd like me to work on in upcoming episodes, you can upload it to the Steam Workshop. There are directions in the description below. You can then email it to me or reach out to me on Twitter and send the link to me that way. When you do, let me know if there are any specific types of public transportation you'd like to see in the city, and if you'd like a total rebuild or just to tweak what you already have in the city for public transportation. As always, if you like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really does help out, and consider subscribing to the channel. And if you do, hit the bell to be sure that you are notified for upcoming episodes. I've mentioned a couple of times that I love feedback. Send me emails. What do you like? What don't you like? As I mentioned in this episode, do people like the time lapses? I like watching them that way. It's just faster, but let me know what you think. And until next time,
mind the gap.